You ever feel the exact moment your soul cracks? Not a break, crack. Like thin ice under a heavy boot. That was me, standing in the rain outside a courthouse 4 years ago, watching Sloane walk away in a jumpsuit that was 3 sizes too big for her. I didn't feel pity. I felt a sick, twisted sense of justice. I'd spent every day of those 4 years making sure her life was a living hell behind those bars. I used my money, my name, and my rage to ensure she didn't have a single second of peace. 'Cause she killed my father. Or so I thought. But today, I'm sitting in a dusty office looking at a manila folder that makes me want to rip my own heart out of my chest. Let's go back to the beginning. Or at least, the beginning of the end. The hook isn't the prison. It isn't the trial. It's the morning she came back. I was standing in my penthouse, looking out at the city I owned, feeling like a king on a throne of glass. My phone buzzed. Private investigator. One I'd hired not to find the truth. I thought I knew the truth, but to make sure Sloane Vane had nowhere to go now that she was out. Elias. The voice on the other end was shaking. You need to come down to the old warehouse on 5th. Now. I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my coat, the silk lining feeling like sandpaper against my skin. I drove like a madman. When I got there, the smell hit me first. Damp wood. Old grease. And something else. Something clinical. In the center of that hollowed-out building, sitting on a milk crate, was Sloane. She wasn't the vibrant, laughing girl I'd proposed to 5 years ago. She was a shadow. Her hair, once a waterfall of chestnut, was hacked short. Her skin was the color of a winter sky. But it was her eyes that stopped my heart. They weren't angry. They weren't even sad. They were empty. I didn't do it, Elias, she whispered. Her voice sounded like crushed velvet. But you already know that, don't you? Deep down. I laughed. Actually laughed. The evidence was everywhere, Sloane. The brakes were cut. Your prints were on the tools. You were the only one with the motive. She stood up, and for the first time I noticed her hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, but from a neurological tremor I'd later find out was a gift from the guards I'd paid to keep an eye on her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a digital recorder. Listen, she said. Just one word. Press play. And then the world stopped spinning. It was a recording of my brother, Julian. He was laughing. Elias is so blinded by grief he'll believe anything. If Sloane takes the fall, the estate is mine to manage while he's busy being a martyr. The recorder clicked off. The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. I looked at Sloane, really looked at her, and realized I hadn't just ruined an innocent woman's life. I had spent 1,460 days systematically destroying the only person who ever actually loved me. I'm going now, she said softly. Sloane, wait. I reached for her arm, but she flinched. Not a small movement. A violent, full-body recoil as if my touch was a branding iron. Don't, she breathed. You spent 4 years making sure I was a ghost. Well, congratulations, Elias. You got what you wanted. I'm dead. This, she gestured to her hollowed-out frame, is just the remains. She walked past me, out into the gray drizzle, and I stood there in the middle of that warehouse while my entire reality collapsed. The lie was gone. The truth was here. And the truth was that I was the monster in her story. I looked down at the recorder. My brother did this. But I was the one who pulled the trigger. I thought I was the punisher. I thought I was the hero of my own tragedy. But as I watched her silhouette disappear into the fog, I realized the chase hadn't even begun. And this time I wasn't chasing a criminal. I was chasing a soul I had personally helped extinguish. But here's the thing about ghosts. They don't like being caught. And Sloane, she wasn't just a ghost. She was a woman who had learned how to survive in the dark. I headed for my car, my mind racing. I needed to find Julian. I needed to kill him. No, killing was too easy. I needed him to feel what she felt. But more importantly, I needed to get to Sloane before she vanished forever. I reached for my door handle, but someone was already there. A man in a dark suit. One of my own security team. He looked at me with a pity that made me want to vomit. "Sir," he said, "there's something else. About the night of the accident. Something the police missed. Or were paid to miss." He handed me a grainy photograph. It wasn't of the car. It was of a hospital ward, dated the same night. My blood ran cold. In the photo, Sloane wasn't at the scene of the crime. She was in an emergency room miles away, being treated for an injury I never knew she had. An injury caused by me. I stared at the date, the time, and the realization hit me like a physical blow to the gut. I wasn't just wrong about the murder. I was wrong about everything. And if I didn't find her in the next hour, the secret she was carrying would be buried with her. The photograph in my hand felt heavier than lead. It showed Sloane in a hospital bed, her shoulder bandaged, her face pale as a sheet. The timestamp was the exact hour my father's car went over that cliff. She couldn't have been there. She physically couldn't have been there. I looked at my security chief, Marcus. "Why am I just seeing this now?" Growled. My voice didn't even sound like mine. Sounded like something breaking. "Because your brother paid the records clerk to lose it, Elias," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the floor. "And back then, you didn't want to see anything that didn't prove her guilt. You wanted someone to burn, and you chose her. The truth is a jagged thing. It doesn't just sit there. It cuts you open." I remembered that night. I remembered coming home, drunk on my own ego, and getting into a fight with Sloane. It shoved her. I hadn't meant to, or maybe I had, but she'd fallen against the marble mantel. I'd walked out, leaving her there, and an hour later, the police called about my father. I'd assumed she left the house out of spite to sabotage the car. Instead, she'd gone to the ER to fix what I did. I spent 4 years telling the world she was a monster to hide the fact that I was one. I got into my car and drove. I didn't go to my office. I went to the apartment she'd rented with the measly few $100s the state gives you when they kick you out of a cage. It was in a part of town where the streetlights hum and the air smells like wet pavement and despair. I climbed the stairs, every step feeling like a mile. When I reached apartment 4B, the door was cracked open. My heart hammered against my ribs. Pushed it open. The room was empty. No furniture. Just a suitcase in the corner and a single mattress on the floor. And there she was, sitting on the edge of that mattress, staring at a small, cracked mirror. She was trying to apply a bandage to a wound on her arm, the tremor in her hand making it impossible. "Sloane," I breathed. She didn't scream. She didn't even jump. She just stopped moving. Slowly, she turned her head. "Did you forget to take something, Elias?" "My dignity. My breath. What's left?" "I saw the photo," I said, stepping into the room. The space felt too small for my expensive suit, for my arrogance. "I know you were at the hospital. I know Julian set it all up." I pulled a checkbook from my pocket. It was a reflex. It's how I solved everything. "I've opened an account in your name. 10 million. It's a start. I'll hire the best doctors, the best therapists. I'll make sure Julian is behind bars by morning." Sloane looked at the checkbook, then up at me. And for the first time in my life I felt truly small. She didn't look impressed. She looked disgusted. "You think you can buy back 4 years of cold iron and silence?" she asked, her voice steady but lethal. "You think $10 million erases the nights I spent screaming your name, praying you'd realize it wasn't me, only to find out you were the one paying the guards to make sure I never saw the sun? I was wrong, Sloane. I'm trying to fix it," shouted. The desperation was bubbling up now. "You can't fix a shattered glass by throwing gold at it, Elias." She stood up, her legs wobbly but her posture rigid. "I don't want your money. I don't want your apology. I want you to feel exactly what I felt." She walked toward me and I didn't move. She stopped an inch from my chest. I could smell the cheap soap she'd used. "I want you to watch everything you love turn to ash," she whispered. "And I want you to know it was your own hand that lit the fire." She grabbed her suitcase and walked past me. I reached out, my fingers brushing the fabric of her coat, but she didn't stop. I watched her go down the hallway, and for a second I thought that was the end. But then I noticed something on the mattress. A small, crumpled piece of paper. Picked it up. It was a sonogram. Dated 3 years ago. From the prison infirmary. My breath hitched. We didn't have a child. I knew we didn't. But as I read the notes on the back, my world turned black. There was a name on that paper, and it wasn't mine. I sat on that bare mattress for an hour, staring at that sonogram. Child. Sloane had been pregnant in prison. My child. No, the math didn't add up. We'd been apart for a year before she was convicted. But then I saw the handwriting on the back. It wasn't medical script. It was a note. He thinks he's won, but he'll never have the one thing that matters. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. I called Marcus. I need the prison medical records for Sloane Vane. Everything. If you have to bribe the warden, do it. If you have to break in, do it. Now. I spent the next 6 hours in my car, parked outside a diner where I'd tracked her. I watched her through the window. She was cleaning tables. The woman who used to host galas for the symphony was scrubbing grease off Formica. Every time a customer spoke to her, she flinched. Every time a door slammed, she looked at the exit. She wasn't just hurt. She was hunted. Around midnight, she walked out the back door. I climbed out of my car, determined to talk to her, to force her to listen. But as I rounded the corner, I saw her meet someone. Man. Tall, shadowed, wearing a heavy coat. He handed her a small envelope. She took it, nodding, and for a split second, I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Not emptiness. Oh. Followed the man. I didn't care about Sloane for a moment. I needed to know who was helping her while I was destroying her. I cornered him in an alley 2 blocks away. Who are you? I demanded, pinning him against a brick wall. The man looked at me and my heart stopped. 'Twas Leo. My father's old driver. The man who was supposed to be in the car when it crashed. The man everyone thought was dead. Elias. Leo gasped, coughing. I wondered when you'd wake up. You're alive. I stammered, my grip loosening. They said you went over the cliff with him. Julian tried. Leo spat, straightening his coat. But Sloane found out. She warned me. She told me to run, to stay dead, so Julian wouldn't come back to finish the job. She took the blame for the crash to keep me safe, Elias. Because I was the only one who knew the truth about your father's will. My head was spinning. She didn't just suffer for a lie. She suffered to save a life. And the baby, Leo? Asked, my voice a ghost of itself. The sonogram in her room. Leo looked at me with a profound, soul-deep pity. That wasn't her baby, Elias. That was yours. From that last night you spent together before the arrest. She lost it 2 months into her sentence because of the extra attention your money bought her from the guards. The alleyway seemed to tilt. I fell back against the opposite wall, the bricks scraping my spine. I had killed my own child. I had paid for the boots that kicked the life out of my own flesh and blood because I was too blinded by a brother's lie. She kept the sonogram to remind herself why she hates you, Leo said softly. Now leave her alone. You've done enough. But I couldn't. I couldn't just walk away now. The guilt was a physical weight, crushing my lungs. I needed to make it right, even if it took the rest of my life. I went back to the diner, but Sloane was gone. I searched every motel, every shelter in a 5-mile radius. Nothing. It was like she'd evaporated. Until I got a text from an unknown number. It was a video. It showed Sloane standing on the edge of the same cliff where my father died. She was looking into the camera, her eyes bright with a terrifying resolve. It ends where it started, Elias, she said. Come say goodbye. I've never driven faster. The engine of my car was screaming, a mirror to the sound inside my head. The cliffside road was slick with mist, the same mist that had swallowed my father 4 years ago. I saw her car first, a beat-up sedan parked crookedly near the guardrail. And then I saw her. Sloane was standing on the very edge, her coat billowing in the wind. Below her, the Atlantic was a churning cauldron of black water and jagged stone. Sloane. Stop! I screamed, jumping out of the car before it had even fully halted. She didn't turn around. Did you know he cried, Elias? Your father. Right before the end. Sloane, please. Go back. I know everything. I know about Leo. I know about the baby. My voice broke on the last word. I was trembling so hard I could barely stand. She turned then. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were cold. You don't know anything. You know facts. You don't know the feeling of a cold floor against your belly while you lose the only thing that made you want to keep breathing. You don't know the sound of Julian's voice through a prison phone, telling me he'd kill you next if I ever told the truth. Froze. Julian threatened me. He wanted the empire, Elias. And he knew as long as I was around, I'd see through him. He used your grief as a weapon. He didn't just destroy me. He turned you into a shell so he could fill you with his own poison. She took a step closer to the edge. A small rock skittered off the side and vanished into the roar below. I didn't come here to jump, Elias, she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I came here to see if you'd actually show up. To see if there was a single shred of the man I loved left inside that suit. There is, I vowed, taking a tentative step forward. I'll spend every second, every penny. I'll ruin Julian. I'll build you whatever you want. Just come away from the edge. I don't want you to ruin him, she said. I want you to let me go. I can't, I choked out. I love you. The laugh that came out of her was the saddest sound I've ever heard. Love. You tortured me for 4 years, Elias. You don't love me. You love the idea of being forgiven so you can sleep at night. Well, I don't give out sleep for free. Suddenly, headlights cut through the fog. A black SUV tore up the road, skidding to a halt behind my car. The door opened and Julian stepped out. He was holding a silenced pistol. His face a mask of calm, calculated evil. Well, Julian said, his voice smooth as silk. This saves me a lot of trouble. The grieving widower-to-be and the convict finally ending it all together. It's poetic, really. I stepped in front of Sloane, my body acting before my brain could process the danger. Julian, it's over. Leo is alive. I know everything. Julian's smile didn't fade. Just got sharper. Leo is a ghost, Elias. And ghosts can be laid to rest. Just like you. He raised the gun, aiming it straight at my heart. I looked back at Sloane. She wasn't looking at the gun. She was looking at me. And for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the girl I used to know. Sloane, run, I whispered. A shot rang out, muffled by the wind. I felt a searing heat in my side, and the world began to tilt. But as I fell, I saw something that didn't make sense. Julian wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his own chest, where a red blossom was rapidly spreading across his white shirt. He looked up, confused, toward the treeline. And then, out of the darkness, a second figure emerged. Someone I hadn't seen in years. Someone who should have been dead. I hit the gravel hard. The pain in my side was a white-hot poker, but all I could do was stare at Julian. My brother, the man who had shared my childhood, my secrets, and eventually my downfall, was slumped against his SUV, clutching a hole in his chest. The figure stepped out of the tree line. It wasn't a stranger. It was my father's lawyer, Silas Vance. A man who had supposedly retired to the coast years ago. He was holding a hunting rifle with the steady grip of a man who had waited a long time for this shot. The will had a clause, Elias, Silas said, his voice cutting through the wind. If Julian ever attempted to harm you or Sloane, his entire share was to be liquidated and donated to the very prison system he used as a weapon. I've been watching, waiting for him to pull the trigger. Julian coughed, a spray of red hitting the pavement. You old fool. But I wasn't looking at Julian anymore. I was looking at Sloane. She hadn't run. She was standing over me, her hands pressed against my wound. Her touch was cold, but her eyes were burning with a fire I hadn't seen since the day I proposed. Why didn't you move? She whispered, her voice trembling. You could have dived for the car. Why did you step in front of me? Because, I wheezed, the world starting to gray at the edges. It was the first thing I've done in 4 years that didn't make me want to vomit. She looked at her hands, covered in my blood. For 4 years, I had shed her metaphorical blood. Now, the literal truth of us was staining the asphalt. The police sirens began to wail in the distance. Marcus must have called them. Silas lowered his rifle and sat on a nearby rock, looking tired. Julian was slipping away. His eyes fixed on the dark sky, finally silenced by the weight of his own greed. I'm sorry, Sloane, I choked out. For the baby. For the silence. For everything. She didn't say it's okay. She didn't offer a miracle. She just looked at me as the paramedics swarmed the cliffside. Don't die, Elias, she said, her voice dropping to a level that made my heart ache. Not because I forgive you, but because I want you to live long enough to see me become the woman you tried to kill. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I watched her walk toward Silas. She didn't look back at the cliff. She didn't look at my brother's body. She looked forward into the rain, a survivor finally stepping out of the wreckage. 3 weeks later, I woke up in a private wing of the hospital. The first thing I saw wasn't flowers or my legal team. It was a legal document on my bedside table, a restraining order. And pinned to it was a note in Sloane's elegant, sharp handwriting. The chase is over, Elias. Now the hunt begins. I didn't understand what she meant until I turned on the morning news and saw my own company's logo being replaced. Recovery is a slow burn. Gives you too much time to think. While the doctors knit my flesh back together, Sloane was busy dismantling my world. She didn't take the $10 million I offered. She didn't need to. It turned out Silas Vance hadn't just been watching Julian. He'd been guarding a secret trust my father had set up specifically for Sloane. My father, it seemed, had known Julian was a snake and feared I was too weak to see it. He'd left her the controlling interest in our family's holding company, triggered only if she was wrongfully removed from the family circle. By the time I could walk without a cane, Sloane Vane was the CEO of Thorne International. I stood outside the glass skyscraper that bore my name, feeling like a ghost in a suit. I wasn't allowed inside. My keycards were deactivated. My assistants wouldn't take my calls. She hadn't just taken the company, she'd erased me from it. I waited by the parking garage at 6 p.m. When her black sedan pulled out, I stepped into the path. The driver slammed on the brakes. The window rolled down. Sloane was wearing a power suit the color of midnight. Her hair had grown out into a sharp, sophisticated bob. She looked lethal. Beautiful, yes, but the kind of beauty that warns you of a cliff edge. You're blocking traffic, Elias, she said. No emotion. Just business. I just want to talk, I said, leaning against the door. I'm not trying to take it back, Sloane. The company, the money. It's yours. You earned it in blood. I need to know how to fix the hole where my life used to be. She looked at me for a long beat. You want a job. Is that it? You want to feel useful. I want to make amends. Fine, she said, and for the first time, a small, cruel smile played on her lips. I'm opening a foundation. For women who have been wrongfully incarcerated. Women who lost their children, their health, and their sanity because men like you decided they were convenient targets. You want to help. You'll be the janitor at the first center I open. You'll scrub the floors, you'll change the light bulbs, and you'll listen to their stories. Every single day. My pride flared for a second. Me. The man who ran the city. Take it or leave it, she said, starting to roll up the window. I'll take it, I blurted out. She paused, the window halfway up. She looked surprised just for a second. Then the mask settled back. Monday. 6 a.m. Don't be late. I fire people for less than a minute's delay. I showed up on Monday. I scrubbed floors until my hands bled. I listened to women talk about the lives they'd lost, and every story felt like a mirror. But 6 months in, something changed. I arrived at the center to find the locks changed again. But this time it wasn't Sloane's doing. There was a symbol spray painted on the door, the crest of a rival firm Julian had been working with in secret. And inside I could hear Sloane's voice, raised in a way I hadn't heard since the night of the accident. She was terrified. I didn't think. I didn't call the police. I grabbed a crowbar from my janitor's closet in the alley and smashed the side window. The center was trashed. Files were everywhere. The stories of these women, their lives, scattered like dead leaves. In the main office I saw them. 2 men I recognized from Julian's old inner circle. Thugs who did the dirty work the Thorne name couldn't touch. They had Sloane pinned against the wall. One of them held a lighter to a stack of legal documents, the trust that gave her control of the company. Julian might be dead, but his debts aren't, one of them growled. We want the liquidation codes, sweetheart. Now. I didn't wait for a clever line. I swung the crowbar. The first guy went down with a grunt. The second one turned, drawing a knife. But I was a man who had spent 4 years fueling a fire of guilt. That fire turned into a blinding, protective rage. I didn't care if I got stabbed. I didn't care if I died. I just needed her to be safe. It was a messy, ugly fight. I took a blade to the shoulder, the same shoulder I'd hurt her on years ago. Poetic justice, I suppose. But eventually they ran. They weren't looking for a fight. They were looking for an easy mark. They didn't expect the janitor to be a man with nothing left to lose. I slumped against the desk, clutching my arm. The room was quiet, save for the sound of our breathing. Sloane slowly let go of the wall. She looked at the wreckage of the office, then at me. She walked over and knelt beside me, picking up a discarded scarf to wrap around my bleeding arm. "You're an idiot," she whispered. Her voice wasn't cold anymore. It was cracked. "I'm a janitor," I corrected, trying to smile through the pain. "Protecting the property is in the job description." She tightened the scarf, making me wince. She didn't let go of my arm. She stayed there, kneeling in the middle of the mess, her forehead resting against my uninjured shoulder. "Why won't you just leave?" she asked. "I've taken your money. I've taken your name. I've made you crawl in the dirt. Why are you still here?" "Because for 4 years I let you be alone in the dark," I said, my voice thick. "I can't change the past, Sloane. I can't bring back the child we lost. I can't give you back your 20-somethings. But I can make sure that from now on, if someone wants to hurt you, they have to go through me first. Even if you never love me again. Even if you hate me until the day I die. I'm not leaving you in the dark ever again." She pulled back, looking into my eyes. For the first time, the emptiness was gone. It was replaced by a raw, bleeding vulnerability. She reached out, her hand hovering near my face, her fingers trembling with that same old tremor. "I don't hate you, Elias," she whispered. "That's the problem. I tried so hard to hate you because it was the only thing that kept me warm in that cell. But I don't hate you. I just don't know who you are anymore." "Neither do I," I admitted. "But maybe we can find out together." She didn't answer. She just helped me up. But as we walked out of the ruined center, a car pulled up. Not a police car. A black limousine with a government plate. A man stepped out, holding a badge. "Elias Thorne. Sloane Vane. We've just unsealed a private safety deposit box belonging to your father. It wasn't just a will inside. It was a confession. And if what it says is true, neither of you is who you think you are." The agent from the Department of Justice didn't take us to a police station. He took us to a nondescript federal building, the kind of place where secrets go to die. We sat in a sterile room, the smell of ozone and old paper thick in the air. My arm was throbbing under the makeshift bandage Sloane had tied, but I couldn't feel the pain. I was looking at the folder on the table. "Your father, Arthur Thorne, didn't just build an empire," the agent said, sliding a grainy yellowed birth certificate across the table. "He built a fortress of lies to protect a legacy that wasn't his to give." I looked at the document. It was a birth certificate for a baby boy born 40 years ago. The name on the father's line wasn't Arthur Thorne. It was a name I recognized from the history books, a rival developer who had mysteriously vanished decades ago after a hostile takeover. Arthur didn't inherit the Thorne name Elias, the agent continued. He stole it. He eliminated the competition, literally, and took their assets, their name, and their life. He raised you, Julian, and even brought Sloane into the fold because her father was the only witness to the original crime. I felt the room tilt. My father, the man I had worshipped and then mourned, was a thief and a murderer. And I was the heir to a stolen throne. But it got worse. The agent turned to Sloane. And you, Ms. Vane. Your father didn't just witness the crime. He was the one Arthur framed for it. He died in the same prison you were just released from, serving a life sentence for a murder Arthur Thorne committed. Sloane's face went completely still. It wasn't the stillness of peace. It was the stillness of a bomb a second before detonation. So my father died a criminal because of his. She pointed a trembling finger at me. Yes, the agent said. But there's a final piece. Arthur's confession in the deposit box. He admitted that Julian found out the truth 5 years ago. That's why Julian killed him. Not just for the money, but because Arthur was going to go to the authorities and confess everything. Julian wanted the stolen empire. He framed you, Sloane, because you were the only one left who could legally claim the original family's assets through your father's estate. I looked at Sloane, the woman I had tortured, the woman whose life I had helped dismantle. She wasn't just an innocent victim of a car accident lie. She was the rightful owner of every single brick, every cent, and every dream I had ever called mine. I wasn't just a monster. I was a squatter in her life. I have nothing, I whispered. It wasn't a complaint. It was a realization. Everything I ever gave you, everything I ever took. It was already yours. Sloane stood up. She didn't look at the agent. She didn't look at the files. She looked through the reinforced glass window at the city skyline. I spent 4 years in a cell for a crime I didn't commit, she said, her voice a low, vibrating hum of fury. And now I find out my whole life was a chess game played by 2 dead men. Elias, do you know what the worst part is? What? I still have to look at your face and see the only person who ever made me feel like I existed. And I hate you for it. I hate you more for the love than the pain. She walked out of the room, leaving the files behind. I went to follow her, but the agent stopped me. Mr. Thorne, or whatever your name is now, there's one more thing. The liquidation of the company. It's already started. Julian's creditors and the original family's heirs are moving in. If you don't act tonight, Sloane will lose the only thing she has left to her name. And the people coming for it. They don't use lawyers. They use silencers. Had to move. I didn't have the Thorne name anymore, but I had the Thorne secrets. I knew the back doors into the accounts. I knew the men Julian had hired. And I knew where Sloane would go when her world collapsed for the second time in a day. She went to her father's grave. It was a potter's field, a patch of overgrown grass where the forgotten were buried under numbered stones. I found her there, kneeling in the mud, trying to scrub the moss off stone number 402. Sloane, we have to go, I said, catching my breath. Julian's associates. They aren't just thugs. They're a syndicate he sold the company's debt to. They're coming to clear the board, and that means us. Let them come, she snapped, not looking up. I have nothing left to lose, Elias. You took it all. Your father took the rest. I can save the estate, I said, kneeling beside her. The DOJ gave me a window. If I sign over my remaining personal holdings and admit to complicity in Julian's cover-up, the government will freeze the assets and protect them as evidence, until they can be legally restored to you. It'll strip me of everything. I'll go to prison, Sloane. For real this time. She stopped scrubbing. She turned to me, her eyes wide. You'd go to jail for me. After everything. It's the only way to keep them from killing you for the codes, I said. And besides, it's the only place I belong. I've spent 4 years on the outside while you were in. It's time I paid my own debt. I pulled out my phone and dialed the DOJ agent. I made the confession. I gave up the locations of the offshore accounts. I laid it all bare. Every lie, every shadow, every sin of the Thorne family. I watched as the janitor became the informant. As I hung up, the black SUVs appeared at the cemetery gates. They weren't feds. They were the cleaners. "Run, Sloane," I said, standing up and pulling the crowbar from my coat. I wasn't a fighter, but I was a man who had found his soul at the bottom of a grave. "Go to Silas Vance. He has the backup files. Don't look back. Elias. Go!" I roared. I watched her run into the woods behind the cemetery. I turned to face the three men getting out of the lead SUV. They had guns. I had a piece of rusted iron and a heart full of something that felt like redemption. The first shot missed, clipping a headstone. Charged. I didn't care about the pain in my shoulder or the cold in my bones. For the first time in my life, I was fighting for the truth. I managed to take out the first one, but the second one pinned me against my father's empty monument. He pressed the barrel of a pistol against my temple. "Where is she?" he hissed. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end, ready to take the secret to the grave. But the shot didn't come from his gun. Came from the woods. And as I opened my eyes, I saw Sloane standing there with a flare gun. Her face lit by a crimson defiant glow. The flare hit the SUV's fuel tank. The explosion was a roar that shook the very earth under the graves. In the chaos and the blinding red smoke, the thugs scrambled. They weren't prepared for a woman who had survived 4 years of hell to start a fire of her own. Sloane grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back exit. We didn't stop until we reached the city limits, the orange glow of the cemetery fire fading in the rearview mirror of a car we'd borrowed from one of the thugs. We sat in silence for a long time as the sun began to peek over the horizon. The city looked different now. It didn't look like an empire. It looked like a project. Something that needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. "You didn't run," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm tired of running, Elias," she said. She was looking at her hands. The tremor was gone. Her grip on the steering wheel was iron strong. And I realized, if I let you die back there, I'd be letting the only person who knows the whole truth disappear. I need you alive. Not for love. Not for forgiveness. But for justice. The next few months were a whirlwind of courtrooms and depositions. I went to prison just as I'd promised. But it wasn't the hell I expected. It was a monastery. I spent my days teaching other inmates to read, working in the laundry, and staring at the small patch of sky through the bars. I finally understood the weight of the silence I had forced on Sloane. And she became a titan. She used the restored assets to dismantle Thorne International. She didn't want the name. She rebranded it, the Vane Legacy. She turned the skyscrapers into low-income housing and the private jets into medical transport. She used the money that was stolen from her father to heal the city my father had bled dry. She visited me once. She sat behind the glass, looking radiant. The hollows in her cheeks were gone. The emptiness in her eyes had been replaced by a quiet, steady strength. "You're getting out early," she said. "The DOJ cleared the complicity charges. They decided your testimony against the syndicate was worth more than a life sentence." "I don't know if I'm ready to be out," I admitted. "I'm still learning how to be a person, Sloane." "Good," she said. She stood up and pressed her hand against the glass. I mirrored her, my palm against hers, separated by an inch of reinforced safety. "Because there's a job opening at the new foundation. We need someone who knows exactly how the system breaks people. Someone who isn't afraid of the dark." "A janitor?" I asked, a tear finally escaping and rolling down my cheek. "A partner," she corrected. "In the work. Nothing more, Elias. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the chase. It's finally over." I watched her walk away, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to follow. Because I knew where she was going, and I knew I'd be right there beside her, building something real out of the ashes of a lie. You see, we spend our lives chasing things we think will fill the holes in our souls. Power, revenge, redemption. But the truth is, the only thing that actually fixes a person is the courage to stand in the wreckage of your own mistakes and say, I am here, and I will do better. Sloane didn't need me to save her. She saved herself. I just had to stop being the one holding her down. And in letting her go, I finally found my own way home. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've lived through something similar, if you've ever had to rebuild your life from a lie or find strength in a betrayal, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.